How'd you like to get behind the wheel of a 10-ton truck? Now you can with US-1 electric trucking.
Welcome. In this segment, we will take a gander at what to look for in the first generation of US-1 products. These are the initial items released in 1981, and most have features that were quickly removed. Whether for production reasons or profit margins is unknown. Unlike a variation, like for example the two different Allied trailers, these differences were prevalent across the entire spectrum of parts, from track to the vehicle chassis parts. And the vehicles are where we will begin. There were only 10 vehicles available at launch in 1981. 2 dump trucks, 2 truck cabs, and 6 automobiles, and these characteristics only apply to them. Starting with the basic chassis. This is a proprietary design only found in US-1. It is basically a triple box design, with sections for the front axle, motor area, and rear axle. The axles are fixed, that is, they are not quick change and easily removed like the HP or 440 series of Tyco chassis, as well as US-1 uses no magnets for traction. Instead, metal weights are used, secured in the aforementioned front and rear box areas of the chassis. There are 2 types, depending on if it is used on a truck cab, or a dump truck/automobile. In these early chassis, they will be solid, meaning there is no hole that was introduced in 1983 for the 3911 fire engine appliance mounting screw. While applicable to the 1982 chassis also, these early chassis will have a 1, or a 2, mold identifier. As well as the traction weights will be of the plain type, where later weights have directional indicators. In the case of the truck cab weight, the early units will have a hole in the 5th wheel. The most obvious clue to these early chassis are the use of brown plastic guide blades, as well as brown worm gear drives. Although the brown gears were also used in very early 1982 chassis, and aren't as reliable for identifying. Additionally, the very earliest chassis were known to have riveted pickup shoes. Tyco seemed to have ditched this almost immediately, as the repair parts were unusable unless these rivets were drilled out. As a side note, these riveted chassis appeared later in both the Army Transport and the G.I. Joe set trucks. Next, we will discuss the bodies. The absolute easiest way to know you have an original early issue body is simply to look at the underside. Every early body was molded from white plastic, then painted to spec. Even with the chassis installed, you can check for white areas, as they didn't paint the body from the underside. The early truck bodies also utilized a black insert piece, that along with holes in the roof and headlight and bumper areas, imitated windshield and lighting detail. Specific to the dump truck, the tailgate did not have a lock function, and the hinge was a pin-in-hole configuration. As well as the mud flaps were detailed with black paint. As for the automobiles, like the trucks, the bodies were molded in white, and then painted. However, in the case of the FedEx, ambulance, and police car, since they are finished in white, it is not as easy to quickly identify painted versus molded in color bodies. Given the Smith's tire color combo, most of that truck is painted no matter the version. Moving on to the trailers, the absolute easiest way to determine if those are first-generation units is as easy as looking for a black dot detail painted on the landing gear. While there are other aspects you can check, this is really all you have to look for. Of note as well, the Beacon's trailer will be painted all white, with later versions getting silver bases. Next, we will check out the details related to accessories. Tyco made 8 accessories, but they were marketed as only being 7. The first accessory we will look at is the 3410 crane pipe loader. There are a couple details that can determine if you have a first-generation crane. First is the dual print script for the General Construction Company logo on the crane body. General is in red, while Construction Co. is in black. Subsequent versions are all red print. To know whether the base is or not, the first generation lacks a locking tab provision for the tracks. This detail also identifies the correct track piece. Note, it is possible that these first-gen cranes also may have black painted track pieces. However, given that this accessory was available throughout the entire production run, it is hard to first-hand verify this info. Moving on to the 3415 log loading bulldozer, the only difference in the first generation is found on the operator. The first generation will have tan-colored hands. The later versions lack this feature. Moving on, the overhead gravel hopper and dump bin 3420 has several ways to spot features to denote the first generation. However, all of these references relate only to the gravel dump site. The track part uses a 3040 part number, and the first generation has a single notch that interlocks on the dump bin, as well as it has 2 hooks at the leading edge of the dump chute. Lastly, the dump bin features a tan-painted floor. Since the 3420 was used throughout the run of US-1 in sets, that does make it easy to know immediately what you have, if you see that tan-painted bin. We will look at the gravel 3425 and freight 3430 terminals together. These are easy to spot, mainly in that both will have a light gray paint applied to the top of the base. But, it seems this is a much rarer feature on the gravel terminal. Or, at least it seems those present themselves less often. Also, the shed on the left side of the gravel terminal building will be painted brown on the earliest ones. Flying into the 3435 airport, from my research, I haven't found any noticeable differences in this accessory. And, finally, we get to the pipe and log unloading yard, 3440. I don't think there are differences in this, except for when it was brought back from retirement in 1984 for the Interstate Delivery 3208. At that point, I think the base with the bump stops was released. Looking at the track components, it is pretty easy to spot these with the yellow lines painted on them. Not much else needs to be said here. In conclusion, this segment centers on the early parts that made up the first run of US-1. The information is especially useful if you are looking to buy a big city, cross-county, interstate, long-haul, 3225 coast-to-coast, or are looking for a first-generation road and rail set. So many times I have seen these sets listed, or sold, and immediately I start picking out the stuff that has been replaced. While this is pretty accurate, there are exceptions, and most notable is the terminal track 3010, with the reverse switch. These have regularly been seen without the painted lines. Coupled with the center-off terminal, and the change to the combined terminal 3025 in 1982, it is hard to pin down exactly when the painted terminals went away, and what sets were most affected. You could end up with a 1981 set with none of these features, or a mix of stuff.
Load it, hitch it, haul it, dump it. US-1 Electric Trucking.